someone I don't wanna know unless they happen to be at this show. I don't know who fucked up or who stole all your shit, but if they're next to you right now, just run up and hit them. Fuck that crazy bitch, man, I wish she had died with my best friend from Bandcamp from suicide. I don't know what's fucked up or what's wrong that I did. You're a grown-up adult getting mad at a kid, so it fell down the hatch and bring it. Wow, if you got something with me, fight me right now.
And here we go. Hey folks, welcome to the Garret Schuelke podcast. I am your host, ya boy, Garret Schuelke, and we have a very special episode today for two reasons. One, it's another banger taking place right here in Grand Rapids, so there's that. And another reason why it's particularly special is because I went to the dentist earlier today and got some work done, and my the bottom right portion of my lip is still very numb. So talking that way, I'm hoping everyone can understand me. In particular, I hope our guest understands me. You can understand me, right, Joe?
I can understand you just fine, yeah.
Okay, good. This is actually our first time speaking, so if I never said anything, you would just assume this is how I speak normally.
I suppose I would have, yeah.
Which, yeah, for the most part, this is indeed how I speak, but, yeah, a little bit numb here, so maybe I'll gargle a little bit. I don't know. Alright, our guest today is a fellow writer, podcaster, and musician, straight from Grand Rapids, as I've just mentioned. He is the host of Writing the Rapids, a writer-curated discussion podcast and audio literary magazine. He is the author of a novel, Tired, which just came out last year. And he even has a Bandcamp featuring noise and field recordings, which we're all going to talk about. Folks, let's, whoa, what's that?
That is my very upset dog.
Jeez.
Across the house.
Okay. I mean, before we came on the podcast, you mentioned that you started playing Dark Souls.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, for a sec there, I thought, wow, is he gaming while he's podcasting?
You know, I considered it, and then I decided that wouldn't be very professional of me to do.
True, but it would be a very Chad move of you.
If I were better at video games, I maybe would be bold enough to do it, but...
Okay. Folks, let's welcome Joe Bielecki, a.k.a. NoiseMakerJoe, to the podcast. Joe, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. I'm curious, did you find my Joe Bielecki Bandcamp, or are you referring to a different one? I have several projects on Bandcamp that I've promoted.
Oh, really?
Over the years, so I'm curious what you found.
Nope, it's the one that's on your website. It has 3 recordings that you have labeled as drone, noise, field recordings.
Okay. Let me go to my website and remember what I have linked up there. It's an out of date. Well, I don't know how out of date it is. It's a very sparsely kept up website.
Happens to the best of us.
Yeah, joebielecki.bandcamp.com. Yeah, those are some old ones. Those are good.
Well,
ones that are up, I really enjoy.
Alright, well, we'll get to that soon enough. Yeah, Joe, how's it been going, dude?
It's been going good. I took June off because we had our first kid, so there hasn't been Writing the Rapids for a while, which has been simultaneously nice and also kind of, you know, I'm itching to get back into it. I'm working on getting a rejoinder going on with, hopefully I can get David Leo Rice and Chris Kelso to talk about their new anthology in a couple weeks, and I got a full length person about getting into the sending of the emails is like the hardest part. So I've been trying to convince myself to keep on working and not just stare at an infant all day.
Between all this, you still find the time to play Dark Souls.
Yep. The most irresponsible thing I can do with my time, I've figured out how to make time for that.
All right, slight correction to the intro. My guest today is a writer, podcaster, musician, and new dad guy. I forgot to put that one in there. All right.
Yeah, that one's taken up all the time, all the thought at least.
Yeah, I gotta get those facts right on this podcast. All right, Joe. I'll actually tell you how I first learned of you and got into writing the Rapids in a bit, but let's go into some background stuff. Your origin, you could say. Are you a GR resident?
Yeah, I am. I was born in Kentwood, went to East Kentwood High School, went to Grand Valley University, and now live outside of downtown. I think that's as specific as I can be about where I live safely.
Safely, all right. I have no qualms with telling people that I live in Heritage Hill. You know, come at me, you cowards. But yeah, I totally understand why you would prefer to be a little bit more private. All right, Joe. So we got that part out of the way. All right. What got you into the arts? Do you remember your first experience being intentionally creative?
Yeah. I think the biggest kind of first thing I did was in maybe the 5th grade. I started writing I guess it was intended to be like a grand fantasy epic that I worked on from like 5th grade through 6th grade and like made maps for and detailed character sheets and stuff like that. When I was a little bit younger, my dad read as like bedtime stories to me and my brother the books of David Eddings, the Bell Garrick series. So I was very into fantasy and stuff like that. Throughout middle school, I worked on a different story, different grand novel sort of thing that fell by the wayside. And after middle school, and then in high school, I was mainly working on music. I was in a metal band junior and senior year, and then kind of got back into writing midway through college. Got my first flash piece published in 2016, and my novel last year, like you said, and then in between worked on a bunch of different little things here and there. Like you said, there's music on Bandcamp, there's false start novels all over the place. Writing the Rapids isn't my first podcast, so basically, once I was old enough to have agency about how I wanted to spend my free time, I've been making some sort of art.
Is this your full-time job, or do you have a day job to supplement your income?
Yeah, it's not. I work for a local radio station, two local radio stations, a public one and a private one, commercial and non-commercial, and I do some freelance writing on the side. So, the Patreon money is nice, but it's nowhere near enough to sustain me, anything like that. But that's kind of the goal, right? The goal is to have enough people excited enough about my work to be able to only do the work.
Oh yeah, it's the goal of all of us indie artists, if you really think about it.
Yeah, I think whether we like to admit it or not, I think there's a couple of us that, I've talked to a couple of people who are like, no, I don't think I would take the opportunity if I could, but I challenge any of you to get that opportunity and be like, nah.
Yeah, I would challenge that opportunity since my day job is at a warehouse and been there for over 9.5 years. So, yeah, if I had that one shot, I would not let it blow. But, yeah, still working towards it. All right, Joe. As I mentioned, you are a writer, podcaster, musician, new dad guy. Is there any type of artistic identity that you identify yourself with more, or is there like a hierarchy, like writer first, podcaster second?
Yeah, I feel like how I would like to be viewed versus probably how I am viewed are opposite. Like, I feel like I want to be a writer first who has a podcast, but I'm just kind of judging by people coming at me with, reaction to any of the work I do. I feel like I'm 100% seen as podcaster first, writer second, which is fine. I put out a lot more podcast media than I do writing, right? I haven't published a story in a long time. I've posted some stuff for free to my Patreon here and there, but for the most part, if somebody's hearing about work that I'm doing, they're hearing about my podcasting, which is fine.
Oh, yeah.
At all, but
yeah.
That's not the original intent.
Yeah, how many episodes of Writing the Rapids are currently out?
Good question. That's a good question.
I think it's like in the 30s.
I feel like it's... Jeez. It's hard to say. I thought it would be... 59 episodes.
Oh, shit.
That's what I have. So,
I'm not that far behind.
Yeah, I've been doing it since 2018, and there definitely have been, like, a month here or there, or near the beginning there was, like, a 6-month period where I just kind of stopped and then picked it back up again.
Dude, imagine if you put out 59 novels.
Right? Like, it certainly takes a lot more effort to pump out 50 to 80, 100,000 words than it does to just talk to somebody for an hour about something they're passionate about talking about.
Oh, yeah, and, yeah, I'd say it's a lot more fun, obviously, because it's a much more social activity. As opposed to just sitting there and writing stuff that you hope to God is good.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas on here, well, I guess it depends on the podcast, but, yeah, you can just talk shit and upload it and, well, get money however you can through ads or Patreon.
Yeah, it's two very different skills, but one, it's kind of like, the improvisational musician versus, like, the symphonic composer, right? Like, John Williams is probably spending a bit more time than John Coltrane when they get into the studio to lay something down.
Yeah. Okay, with that said, let's get into the very meat of the podcast. Let's get into your podcast, Writing the Rapids. As you actually mentioned earlier, you have previous podcasts to this called Sharing Everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something I did with my wife, where I think it was weekly for however long we did it, where we would alternate weeks, and I'd show her a movie I liked that she'd never seen before, and then she would pick a movie that she liked that I'd never seen before, and we would watch it together and we'd talk about it. And that there are podcasts older than that are lost to time, but Sharing Everything was a fun concept, and we just sort of fizzled out of doing that. I think once I started doing this show, I kind of ran out of the energy to do two shows like that took so much preparation. The last episode was March 2018, 2018, and my first Writing the Rapids was February.
Well, the name of it was Sharing Everything. Did you run out of things to share?
No, I think we could have kept going. I do think at some point we would have gotten to a point where we would have had to sort of change the format. Especially now. Back then, our work schedules were much different. I had two jobs that had hours that changed weekly, right? So there would be time. There was a lot more time when we were not together than there is now with the job my primary job that I currently have. So it's a lot more difficult now for us to watch movies on our own. So I think it would just end up turning into a general, we're going to sit down and watch this movie because it looks interesting sort of thing.
Just a general movie review podcast.
Right. Which we don't need more of. There's plenty.
If you really think about it, there's plenty of every type of podcast out there. I actually kind of had that issue when I first started this podcast, because I was like, oh, geez, is there really need of another podcast with like two people just talking shit to each other, just interviewing one another? I mean, Joe Rogan kind of already has that market on tap, but I braved through that, and years later, I'm now past episode 50, so go me.
I think the Writing the Rapids thing has its gimmick for that very reason, right? Where, like, it's not just me picking whatever writer is interesting to me, it's me going off of a list that previous guests have had, or have given me. And part of that is to, like, force me to listen to new voices, read people I wouldn't normally read, or read people who I might be moderately interested in but put off. And then beyond that, it's just personality, which, maybe Writing the Rapids would be more successful if I had a better personality, but who's to say?
Oh boy, I think about that about myself too every day. Whether it's my personality, my accent, or my wonderful sense of humor, which I've gotten many a comment about. Some good, some not so good. Okay, before Writing the Rapids though, what got you into podcasting in general?
Yeah, I tweeted about this the other day, and back in the iTunes days, back when I was using iTunes as my primary source of discovering, listening, storing music, I was playing World of Warcraft a lot, and this was like right after the first expansion pack had come out, right after Burning Crusade had come out, so it was late 2006 or early 2007. I literally just typed World of Warcraft into the iTunes store, and a podcast called The Instance came up, and listened to that, started listening to the other podcasts that guy, whose name is Scott Johnson, was doing at the time. At some point, I think maybe as I was preparing for a road trip of some kind, I was looking for podcasts that had stories, and so I discovered Podcastle and Escape Pod and Pseudopod, which are all put out through the company Escape Artists, and they publish short stories weekly in the fantasy, science fiction, and horror genres. And so I've been listening to podcasts for, God, what is that, like 16 years now? Pretty much.
Yeah, I'm trying to whistle, but
daily,
again,
like a couple times a week.
Very nice. Okay, and how about Writing the Rapids? How did this podcast come about?
Yeah, the idea came, I think I was inspired after watching the Jackson Pollock biopic movie with Ed Harris. There's a scene.
Never heard of that
at the
one.
beginning. Oh, it's pretty decent. Yeah, I don't have a ton really to say about it aside from there's a scene at the beginning where Jackson Pollock and a bunch of other painters are like sitting in a bar and they're like yelling at each other about Picasso. And I was just sort of, it's 2018, so I've had work published for like 2 years. I'm, publishing work in literary magazines. It's hard to get a whole bunch of people to pay attention to you. But I found myself wanting that energy of writers sitting down and being really passionate about writing. Whereas a lot of the writing podcasts that I had come across up until that point had largely been for people who wanted to write, right? So this sort of like, how do you write a cover letter? Let's talk to an agent about it, and then it would be an interview with an agent, or, this sort of, it's so hard to sit down for an hour every day to write, but we gotta do it sort of stuff. And I just found that, like, if I didn't enjoy the personality of the person who was doing that sort of show, I just didn't care, because it was like, well, I could spend an hour listening every week to these people talk about how to trick yourself into writing every day, or I could just write. And interview shows have always been interesting to me, but I find that with writing, it's kind of hard to want to listen, for me at least, to an interview with a writer who I don't know and haven't read. So it was trying to solve this problem of, like, how do I do a podcast about writing with writers that someone who hasn't read that writer would feel interested in listening to. So the initial pitch was, like, we're going to talk about writing with a capital A, or talk about writing as if it were an art with a capital A. And if you're wondering what that means, it doesn't really mean anything. It was just like, let's just talk about, like, the craft of writing. And I'm not sure if I really have, like, gotten there a lot of the time. I feel like it's hard to do that because I don't exactly even really know what that means. And I'm, I don't have a degree in literature or anything like that. I'm very much just like a schmuck who enjoys books. So that's how it came about. Is I wanted to explore this community, and it's hard for me to just like DM somebody and ask them questions or strike up a conversation with them. I'm actually fairly shy in my private life, so having this premise of like, hey, let's talk about your books and writing in general context, and trying to make friends that way, and then and trying to find books to read, and then sort of trying to solve this problem of like, why aren't there, as far as I can tell, any writing podcasts out there that I would want to listen to.
Very nice. Well, since I gotten into you and Writing the Rapids, I have to say it's a very stellar podcast, and quite a lot of big names on the indie lit scene. Some of them that I'm personally a fan of, some of them that I've friends with online, some that I've even interacted with in real life. For folks who don't know, here's just a list of guests from Writing the Rapids that I find particularly notable. A.S. Coomer, Lisa Cantrell, Autumn Christian, C.V. Hunt, Zack Smith, Sam Pink, and, and the writer who actually made this current episode possible, the one who introduced me to you, Noah Cicero. I interviewed him way back in episode 40, and as we were talking, I mentioned that I'm from Grand Rapids. He's like, oh, no way, really? Like, oh, yeah. Oh, I just talked to a guy who's also has a podcast in Grand Rapids. And I was like, wait, what the fuck? Okay, no, I didn't say that. But, no, Noah directed me to your Twitter, and, yeah, that's how I got into the podcast.
It was wild. You know, I think I remember that him saying something like he was talking to another person from Grand Rapids, and I just didn't pick up on it. But yeah, it's funny because, you know, especially when you're out of college, it's hard to meet people. It's hard, especially if you're someone like me who's, you know, my wife and I started dating in high school and never broke up or took a break or anything. So,
high school sweethearts.
The need for me to go out and meet people after college is gone. There's no reason for me to, I mean, I stopped drinking like 4 years ago, but there's no reason for me to go to a bar. There's no reason for me to go to a party at all. Unless there's like a band I like playing, but most of the time I'd rather just be in and watching TV with my wife instead of going out to a show, unless it's a band I'm like really excited about. So
Okay.
it's amazing because there's a couple other people in Grand Rapids who do like cool stuff in this indie lit scene, and we just all walked past each other on the street without knowing about it.
Yeah. Yeah, Noah Cicero, great guy, great writer. He's, one of my top 10, I would say. And, yeah, as I told him, yeah, no doubt about it. People in Grand Rapids love Noah Cicero.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, this folks, like I said, are just some of the particular guests that I wanted to point out. So to get into interviewing itself, what's your approach to interviewing, you know, these writers? Has it changed over time?
I don't think it has changed very much over time. The approach is I try to read a book or two of theirs beforehand, and it's kind of gotten down to like one book at this point, especially since I started doing the rejoinders. But I tend to read their work and then scroll through their social media to try to figure out what, in my estimation, their approach to writing is, what they're trying to do with whatever it is that I'm reading, or just in general, and then just try to dig into that. I don't really plan out a lot of questions. Maybe I'll take a couple notes while I'm reading, but for the most part, I'm just kind of feeling it out. And I always pitch to people who I want on the show that it's more of a conversation than an interview, so I try not to have questions set up because I don't want it to turn into that. My favorite episodes are the ones where they start asking me questions and then I'm answering their questions, and we're like really just kind of, you know, doing the thing. Two artists sitting in a smoky bar yelling about art, which is like always kind of the goal.
Oh, yeah.
And it's kind of hard too because people are, you know, even if you tell them it's not an interview, they're still kind of going into it expecting it to be an interview.
Oh, yeah, I do believe you have one episode with Zack Smith where it's him basically interviewing you about something.
Yeah, that was just a literal reversal episode. I tweeted out, like, man, I really wish that people would interview me sometimes. And he was like, okay, I'll do it. And he interviewed me about my book, and that was really fun.
Well, here you are now. So, so you got your wish, my friend.
I sure did.
All right. In regards to future guests, are there anyone that you have in mind that you've been trying to get on, or that you would like to have on?
There's a couple people I've been in contact with. There's a couple people who, you know, just like scheduling never worked out. Why can't I think of their names now? Mike Klein and I have talked about Garret Schuelke and his work a lot. I'd really like to have him on at some point Otherwise, like I'm really kind of satisfied with who I've gotten on so far. And I'm just kind of like working my way through the list. There's so many people who write exciting things, but because of the amount of time that preparing for the show, reading these books takes up, it's kind of just like, as I'm preparing for the episode of the month, I'm reading the person I'm most excited about, is usually how it kind of works out. So I don't have a ton of specifics of like dream guests and stuff. Like, I kind of assumed it would be more difficult to get Sam Pink on than it was. I kind of assumed the same thing about like Noah Cicero too. Like you mentioned, there's some big names on there, and for some reason I was able to get them. And so it's more just a matter of like continuing to explore the scene, whatever the scene means, and seeing who's available and getting them on if they are available.
All right. A question that just popped in my head, a little bit off subject, but were you by chance at stokecon when it came to Grand Rapids?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
I didn't know it was happening until I saw people tweeting about it.
Okay. Because that's actually where I met Lisa Cantarell and, well, I didn't meet Autumn Christian. She was there, but I did get a chance to say hi. Met a lot of other writers, too. Like Brian Keene and Don Noble and a few others. But, yeah, it just popped in my head like, wait, was Joe there?
Yeah, I wasn't. I should have been, but totally wasn't. Is that happening again? It doesn't look like.
Oh boy,
much.
I honestly have no clue. And I like horror, but I'm not like a big super fan where I'm like following like when conventions like that go on or what the HWA is doing.
Oh, I see. It looks like StokerCon is in Denver this year, or was in Denver this year.
Yes.
Back in May. So I guess it moves around. It must move around.
Yeah, so hopefully it'll come back here sometime.
Yeah.
Okay, so what does the future hold for Writing the Rapids? Any big changes or anything to the podcast that you want to do?
No, I'm cruising, man. I think I would love to. It's kind of all Patreon dependent, which is it makes me feel icky to say like, oh, if people gave me more money, I'd have more time to do it. But if people gave me more money, I'd have more time to do it. Like, I would love to somehow, and I have no idea how. It'd have to be my only job. Have a weekly episode. The idea of live streaming has always been really attractive to me, but I find myself getting quite discouraged about it. There's something, it's a completely different skill, of course, but there's something really discouraging about, like, having been online for an hour and seeing, like, one viewer who's not even logged into the chat, and you're just kind of, like, sitting there. So I think back in February I did do a live show with Ava Hoffman and Persephone Hudson, and that was really cool to have them on, and there were some people in there. And the year before that, I did a read-through of B.R. Yeager's Pearl Death. So I think I want to continue the tradition of doing like one kind of event live stream a year. And I want to keep doing the rejoinders. I really like those. Those become easier and easier to schedule the more people I have on, because I have more people to watch. I've been waffling in my brain about kind of rejiggering my Patreon tiers and maybe eliminating tiers altogether, or trying to make that whole thing look more attractive, but I can't really see in my brain like a really good way of doing that. So I don't know, maybe people listen to this and they have ideas.
From one fellow writer to another, I will give this advice. Don't try not to feel icky or guilty about, admitting that you'd probably be more productive if you got paid for it. Because, it's true. We all probably would. But we probably would be more productive and, hell, maybe even enjoy it more if we got a more substantial reward for it. But,
surely. I mean, definitely I'm doing it, it's fun to do it, right? Like, I think I try to make it clear that it's not that, I won't do more if people don't give me money. It's more a matter of just, like, I don't have the time or the bandwidth.
Exactly.
Right? The nice thing about surviving off of 2 part-time jobs is that the transition has the potential to be a lot smoother, right? Like, it's not like I'm taking, this hobby and replacing a $60,000 a year job with it or anything. It's like I can cut back on hours, I can leave one job, sort of thing, where, if there's movement on that. But I think largely there's a joke that one of my professors in college had, that, like, the poetry world is just a bunch of people passing the same $5 bill around. And I feel like trying to get people on my Patreon is kind of the same thing, right? Where, like, if everybody who followed me on Twitter gave me just $2 a month, I'd be making like $900 a month, and I'd be able to quit one of my jobs and probably be able to double my output, or do live streams regardless, or something or other. But it's a bunch of people who work in warehouses and have 2 part-time jobs to stay alive. Like, it's not like I'm the poorest person in the scene. I'm probably doing pretty okay compared to a lot of other people.
I mean that's what the term indie is for. You're independent, you're alternative, you're underground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. So the big kind of thing I want to break into, or do next, is I want to do video essays on YouTube, because I think that the biggest way of getting people into reading is not through written media, and the biggest way of getting people into indie lit is not by talking about indie lit. So, like, if I can do, here's the 5 books you should read if you really liked House of Leaves, and they're all Inside the Castle, 1111, Schism 2 press books, then it gets people in the door through the House of Leaves clickbait, and then, brings people into the scene, because with the exception of, like, one person, I'm pretty sure everybody who listens to my podcast writes themselves, whether or not they've been on the podcast or not. Like, it's writers listening to writers talk about writing, which is good, and all that, but, there's no way that money is going to come into the ecosystem if the people paying into the ecosystem are also profiting from the ecosystem.
Yeah, plus really, if you think about it, like I said, we're all indie, working class, perhaps poor writers. It's not like, let's say Stephen King or, God, who's that shitty writer? James Patterson. It's not like James Patterson has a Patreon and is, like, demanding money and saying, hey, I could put out another book with Bill Clinton if I reach this many subscribers.
Right, yeah. Who was that? There was somebody recently who did that. Brandon Sanderson, like, had a Kickstarter that just went, like, nuclear. Like, it was amazing how much money he got, and a bunch of people were kind of scoffing about it on my timeline. And, I don't know. Brandon Sanderson, love him or hate him, I haven't read any of his books. My wife has, and she said it was good.
Hey, how big? I never heard of him. How big of a writer is he?
He's a huge fantasy writer. He's, I think, probably most well known for just having a very intricately crafted magic system. So there's not a lot of like hand wavy superpowers to have people get themselves out of jams or anything like that. Like everything seems, from what I've gathered, through osmosis, like there are rules to his universe, and he follows the rules.
Okay.
And people are into that.
All right. All right, dude. We're done with this section of the interview, and yeah, I believe that it's time for a commercial break. We'll be right back. Greetings, it is I, Jordan Peterson, and unfortunately, facts, logic, and rationality have once again been defeated on Twitter because I have been banned for dead-naming a celebrity whose films I have never seen. Well, except maybe Juno, I don't know. Anyway, I, Jordan Peterson, am very, very sad. Indeed, it has been sad, and nothing I do seems to elevate it. I've cleaned my room numerous times. I've eaten only the best meats that my hot daughter prescribes to me. And despite my wishes, I cannot get to Russia to once again be put into a medically induced coma. But you know what I found does cheer me up though? Listening to the Garret Schuelke podcast. Yes, the Garret Schuelke podcast. Hosted by writer, podcaster, and pseudo-musician Garret Schuelke, where he talks to friends, acquaintances, and favorite people about numerous things. From politics, to music, to YouTube campers, to politics. Oh, I think I just mentioned that, but it bears mentioning again. And as always, it's just so humorous. It makes me forget the time I wore a tuxedo and cried on the Roe Jogan experience. And thankfully, cancel culture has not come for Garret Schuelke yet, because you can still find him on Twitter, including the official Garret Schuelke podcast Twitter, @Schuelke Podcast. You can listen to him on anywhere, from Spotify, to iTunes, to Anchor, to Podbean, but not those cucks on iTunes, because for some reason they won't let him on. Yep, that's right, listen to the Garret Schuelke Podcast wherever you can. I'm Jordan Peterson. Boy, I gotta go research some more crabs. Or is it lobsters? I don't know. Bye-bye. Okay, we're back, and wow, what a wonderful commercial that was. Boy, I'm glad I'm getting all these promotions now. Garret Schuelke podcast is just going up the charts with these commercials. All right, folks, we're back, and we just finished the portion of the podcast where Joe, we talked about your origins. We've talked about Writing the Rapids, your podcast. Now let's get into your novel, Tired. Yep, I believe it's your first novel. It was published back in February 2021 through Alien Buddha Press. Yeah, can you summarize to us what the novel's about?
Yeah, it's about two people, Eric and Alexis, who go on a sort of coming-of-age, self-discovery road trip that is kind of like a surreal fever dream sort of thing. I call it a surreal nightmare road trip coming-of-age story. And I guess that's like the best pitch, right, that I can think of to say for it. I've always kind of had a hard time really describing it, because I want to talk about what happens in it so much that it's hard for me to talk about what it's about. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, Yeah, do whatever you want, man. Spoiler alert, just put that out there.
Yeah, I mean, let me just, list some of the things. It's kind of, episodic. It almost feels like a Greek epic in structure. There's, gender dysphoric truck drivers, there's reincarnation, there's a factory that keeps on growing and eating things, that's become so big that people just live in there. There's a city lit entirely by green light. One of the characters, transmorgifies into a stone Jesus for a little while. There's time loops. There's strange asides about worms. It's very kind of just odd. I was watching a lot of David Lynch, and I was in college when I was writing it, so you can kind of tell.
Okay, to go back a little bit before Tired, you mentioned a little bit that you've had previous work published, in various publications. How about novels or just books in general? Have you made any attempts to write or have published beforehand?
Tired was the first novel I ever finished. It's the first novel that I had any sort of finished first draft to and did any sort of editing to. And that was written in 2015, probably finished in early 2016. So it was written and completed before I got my first Flash piece published.
Oh, really?
Before I was introduced to this world, this scene at all. And so kind of the reason I started writing Flash fiction and getting into this scene was to figure out where in the world I could get this thing published. Very naively, I kind of imagined it was super experimental and crazy and unlike anything else. And that turned out not to be the case. There's a million times weirder stuff, both in structure and formatting and story and whatnot. But as a person, as a young person who really kind of understood books to be stuff you could find in a store and either genre or literary, I had no idea. So I started just, I think I found Schism Press based on an article that Blake Butler had written, and so got into B.R. Yeager's writing, and then followed him on Twitter and just sort of tried to see who he was following. And then I found a couple people who seemed interesting and tried to look at who they were following, and then tried to develop a list of literary magazines from there, and yada, yada, yada. So it was a very, deliberate sort of, I have to figure out where I belong. I'm not even sure that I've really found a place where my writing really belongs, because now I feel like I've gone, too hard into weird stuff, where so much of the stuff that I read is, way weirder, and has sensibilities that are kind of beyond, what I'm interested in writing or have the skills to write for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
So I've over calibrated, which is hilarious to me.
Yeah, have you ever checked out Duotropes?
Yeah, I have. I just don't feel like paying money. I just don't feel like paying money for it.
Yeah, actually, I think if I remember the years correctly, what you were just describing, I think it was actually free around that time. Now it's paid. Yeah, I know this because I recently got back on the Duotropes. Because I'm trying to get back into... Well, to summarize, this is going to be the first year since 2016 where I haven't published a book.
Oh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, basically because, I'm just kind of burnt out on it, and so I decided not to this year. So I'm just working on some other stuff, like continuing podcasting, putting out music through my music project, and well, submitting stuff and publishing them. So, sign up for a Duotrope's account again.
I guess so. Especially since Entropy Mag shut down, because they had their quarterly where to submit. That was super useful.
Wait, which one shut down?
Entropy Mag.
Oh, shit, it did?
Yeah, they shut down, what was it, end of last year? The website is still up. But they have a banner on their website that says Entropy is closing at the end of 2021. Read the farewell announcement from our founder here. So their small press database is still up, but I don't think they're doing the where to submit anymore.
Dude, that's a fucking bummer, man.
Yeah, there's another small press guy that's building a database between the Highway Press, I believe, has a database of places to submit.
That's between the Highway Press?
Yeah, between the Highway.org, between the Highway Press, has a bunch of stuff. Otherwise, Oleada, OLEADA, .io is sort of doing kind of setting themselves up to be a submittable but for indie presses only sort of thing that has 24 presses on it. Or I just go to poetsandwriters.org, which is like Duotrope but free.
Oh yeah, I'm very well aware of that publication. Yeah.
Yeah. But the problem I always have with databases like that, and sort of the reason I'm so slow to submit anything, is because they all say, please be familiar with our work, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I feel like I can respect that, and so I should probably read a book or two from this press, and then I don't get any books from their press, not because none of them look interesting, but because I have stuff to read from Writing the Rapids, and I have a giant TBR pile in my house because I go to Barnes & Noble and used bookstores all the time, just like that's a leisure activity that my wife and I do. So I'm accruing books all the time anyway, and whether they're from presses that are a bit weirder than I submit to, or way more mainstream, or I'm reading stuff from dead people being published through imprints that publish stuff from dead people, I haven't, with a couple exceptions, haven't really found a stable of presses that are putting out work that I feel like my work would really, really fit in with. And I'm also open to the idea that I'm just wrong about that, and there are places that I read and presses associated with people I talk to on the podcast that would be interested in my writing, and I'm just, too shy to submit.
No, I get that too with my writing, because I'm pretty good online homies with a lot of people who are weird writers, in say the bizarro fiction genre or horror.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas me, my main genres are poetry, literary fiction, and superhero fiction. Which is, a lot more, at least superhero fiction, way more of a niche market.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I know exactly what you're saying there. Alright, so, actually, yeah, betweenthehighwaypress.org. Yeah, I wrote that down, because I'm going to look at it later. Alright, back to the novel. How would you describe the style that it was written in?
I think I was really inspired by Cormac McCarthy at the time. So lots of long sentences, lots of long paragraphs. Definitely not done as kind of carefully as he writes. But it's very sort of flowy like that. And I try to use long sentences and lists as a sort of cudgel against the reader. I was sort of writing it, where it was like, I want to write a book that's hard to read, that's nobody is going to feel comfortable reading, both in structure and in content. And again, naive, because I hadn't discovered amphetamine sulfate press or whatever yet.
Yeah, slow down there, David Forrest Wallace.
Right, like the idea that all of the dialogue between the two main characters is unattributed. And I also didn't put quotation marks in because Cormac McCarthy. So like I was under this impression that like having two people talk to each other for a book length work and never knowing which one of them is actually doing the talking was just like the most revolutionary thing ever. And I was really pleased with myself about that idea. But yeah, so I don't know. I was trying to. I didn't plan it out. It was all discovery writing. It was all just like, what wacky thing is going to happen now? So they would kind of be in a location or in a situation, and I would play it out, and then I'd be like, all right, and what's next? What's beyond the horizon? So there was a bunch of stuff that was like they're in a city, and then they're in a suburb, and then they're out in the middle of nowhere, and then they're back in the city, but it's a different city. Just kind of like endlessly moving forward, and so it becomes this sort of episodic thing. I'm not sure how accurately that answers your question, but that's my answer.
Okay, well, still in regards to the writing style, do you still write like that today, or has it changed?
Yes and no. I think my style is not. I think here it's like important to make a distinction between style and voice, right? Like I feel like anything that you read by me is clearly written by me, but the presentation is different, sort of depending on the story. I've written book-length manuscripts that are kind of very standard in terms of like sentence structure and paragraph, and there's attributed dialogue, and there's quotation marks, and there's commas. But I don't know. I feel like because they're all written, everything I write is written by me. The sensibility is there. It's also, I think, either a detriment or a boon to me that because of the podcast and because of me reading so many different people, not only contemporary people, but also trying to like catch up on the classics in my free time, or reading academic texts or whatever it is that I'm like interested in, kind of recreationally. That I'm inundated with so many different styles in the way that I read that it's tough for me to nail down one specific way that I like to write. I feel like maybe there's like several different characters of myself, like different versions of Joe Bielecki that write in different ways. And if you took the time to categorize them and name them, you could probably like go through my Google Drive and be like, these pieces are this and these pieces are that. But I think I'm too close to it to really be able to describe exactly how I feel about all of that, or where I think I'm going, or where I think I am.
I see. Okay, and how about the writing process for the novel? Do you remember any of it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. Since for a lot of it I was still going to school, and because my senior year of college I lived back at home. I didn't live on an on-campus or an off-campus apartment, and my wife lived at home too. And we would carpool. So there would be times when our class schedules didn't line up, or there would be times where I'd have an hour break in between class anyway. And so I just kind of wrote in between classes, or while waiting for my wife to get out of class, or waiting for my class to begin, sort of thing. At a certain point, kind of in the middle of the initial writing, I was forcing myself to write 2,000 words a day, I did that for maybe about half of the length of the book. I do think I took like 6 months where I just didn't think about it after I graduated, and then pumped it up to 80,000 words, put in an ending, called it good, and then sat on it for a while, maybe a year, maybe 2, before I did another pass through it, and then maybe waited another year before I did a third pass, kind of sparsely submitting it here and there whenever the urge bit me, and then finally finding Alien Buddha Press through A.S. Coomer, because he's got a couple books through there, and submitting to them when I saw that they were accepting.
Yeah, I have to say, I do follow them on my alt account, the account that I rarely use, except for when I get banned for whatever reason. But, yeah, I have to say, I'm really impressed with how productive the Alien Buddha Press has been. And just how open and just how open their submissions are, too, because that's actually kind of been one of my main gripes with indie publishing. That's why I self-publish mostly, is that a lot of publishers are closed.
Yeah, closed or not open to unsolicited stuff. I mean,
that
part
too.
Part of the reason I started doing flash fiction, and just like, there was a 6-month period in 2016 where I was just trying really hard to get as much out as possible, with this foolish idea that people who run those presses that are never open to unsolicited manuscripts are like reading literary magazines trying to find new people to publish, which maybe that's the case, but it certainly hasn't been the case for me. So, you know, there is, but it's a saturated market, definitely, where you'll have a press that, you know, is run by one person who is only able to put out a couple books a month because of the amount of marketing they want to do for it, or the amount of hands-on formatting that they want to do for it. And yeah, the Alien Buddha Press, I think, is still a one-man operation, but he largely is kind of there to help you get the book out, and then it's up to you to convince people to buy it.
Yep, so pretty much your typical indie press, son.
Yeah.
Oh, no, a question that just popped into my head, actually. Before Alien Buddha Press, did you, sorry, let me rephrase that. Did you, when you were trying to find a publisher for your novel, did you by chance fall for any scam presses?
No. In fact, I did as a kid, right? I talked about the fantasy stories that I wrote. Before I never finished a book-length manuscript for either of those, but I do remember Google searching on my parents' computer, like, book publishers free to submit. And so there's a couple vanity presses out there that I, air quotes, submitted to as like this, 13-year-old kid that were like, oh yeah, totally, send us your book and your bank account information. And I was like, I'm a child, I'm not going to do that. So I did have a couple writing professors who I talked to about like trying to get stuff published and that sort of thing before I really started actually trying to get anything published. So they gave me those guidelines of, don't pay unless you know the press and you're pretty sure that you're gonna get published, or you don't mind taking a bath on it. Otherwise, just find stuff free. And the scam presses too are also a reason why you should read the literary magazine or the press you want to get published with, to make sure that they're publishing work that is worth your time to be published alongside.
All right, so so far, how So it was published last year in 2021. How has the reception for the book been so far?
It's been fine. Like a couple people have read it. I sent a lot of free copies out. And some people have said really nice things. Mike Klein seemed to really enjoy it. Who else? Paul Barry Clark, I think is his name. Barry Paul Clark wrote a nice review about it. Scott Manley Hadley wrote a nice review about it on their blog. And a couple other people here and there. I was surprised how much my family seemed to enjoy it, because I really thought that they would just sort of, buy it to be nice and not actually touch it. Not a lot of people have picked it up, as far as I can tell. But the people who have really enjoyed it, from what I can tell, which is good enough for me.
Oh, that's good. So right now, working on any new books at the moment?
Yes and no. I always have several projects sort of ready to go. I do have 2 books out right now, sort of sitting in submission inbox purgatory, that I'm using as a excuse to not try harder at getting anything published. But yeah, I do have 2 books that I feel like are finished and ready to be sent around more. I do NaNoWriMo every year, so, and have since maybe 2017, right? So I have like several book length works at any point in time that I could be editing, or could be submitting. I'm like a poem and a half away from a chapbook that I think I'm, too afraid to finish, and so I'm just kind of letting it languish. And here and there I've been writing bits and starts of scripts for video essays that I hope to do, or essays about books. So I feel like I write a lot, but it's so unfocused that it doesn't feel like I'm writing anything ever.
Yeah, I had that feeling a couple of years ago, but thankfully it's one of the writing habits and beliefs that I've had that I've kind of reined in, as I've grown older and gotten work published. So, but still, a lot of bad habits remain.
Yeah.
All right, so, Tired. Where can people find it?
It's on Amazon. It's I think that's the only place you can buy a physical copy, aside from, I guess, DMing me. I have 1 physical copy left in my house. I need to get some more. Or if you want a digital version, you can just DM me on Twitter, and I will send it to you. I'm happy to do that. In fact, thanks to what I imagine is Prime Day, it's only $10.50 on Amazon as of recording this right now. So
yeah, everyone stop. Everyone,
feel free to get a good deal.
Everyone, pause this podcast and go get it now. Actually, no.
Go back in time.
Actually, no. No, this is a podcast. It's an audio medium. You can listen to this podcast while you're buying Joe's book. Do that right now.
Yeah.
All right, we're done with that portion. Let's get to the second to last one. Your Bandcamp, or should I say Bandcamps?
Yeah. I totally forgot about the Joe Bielecki project. That was something I used. I had the idea for a 4-part series called Scrape, Scratch, Cut, and Dead, and that would each have a half hour of music on it, regardless of how many tracks that took. That would be a sort of mixed media insofar as audio can be. And there's a couple tracks up there. There's Scrape has 2 tracks that are very much that sort of mixed media thing where I use like field recordings, recorded instruments, and Foley work, and then lots of DAW manipulation. Scratch has a 20-minute drone track that I think is really good. I'm really pleased with that track. And Dead has one almost 10-minute feedback loop noise track that I also really enjoy. So yeah, Bielecki.bandcamp.com. You can see the stuff I was doing back in 2015 before I started writing flash fiction. And then there is a project that I did called Ring of Roses that I tweet about every now and again.
All right, I'm actually writing that down.
Yeah, I tweet about it every now and again. That is just a straight up noise project. It's kind of droney, but I did an album called You and I Will Never Be Friends after a particularly bad time with some friends. That was just a really cathartic experience. I'm trying really hard to find it and talk at the same time. I just can't, which is hilarious. It's hilarious that there's stuff I can't, of mine that I can't find. And then I will say there is a music project I did back in high school that exists on Bandcamp.
Okay.
And is kind of embarrassing, and that's all I'm going to say about it.
Actually, I'm embarrassed right now because I thought you only had one Bandcamp, but god damn it, how can I miss that high school project you did?
I mean, when I was tweeting about it a lot, anything before a couple of years ago, I scrubbed a while ago when I tried to transition my Twitter account into like a writing Twitter account.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a period of time way back in the day where I was trying to be a different kind of musician. Which just straight up ringofroses.bandcamp.com. I thought I had to do other weird stuff to it.
Okay.
Yeah, that came out in 2017.
Yeah, so what attracts you to field recordings, noise music, or drone music?
The field recordings really started as there's a field recordist who has some albums floating around the internet named Chris Watson, who does really cool sound collage, like nature recording type stuff. And there's a compilation album that he's on with some other field recordists that I can't remember the name of because it's in French, that had like waterfall recordings. And so there was a lot of, white noise type stuff because of the nature of rushing water. And all of that coincided with me taking the sort of top-tier audio production class at Grand Valley my senior year there. And we had to do a project that incorporated like all of these different elements of what we had learned throughout the year. So like recording stuff and putting together different aspects of audio and using different effects and things like that. So one of the tracks that's on that JoeBielecki.bandcamp.com just straight up is a final project that I did for school. And there was just something really cool about it, especially after having tried to make more traditional sounding music a couple years prior, of like just kind of doing whatever and not worrying about song structure and not worrying about music theory or anything like that, and just like really kind of playing reverb like an instrument and playing automation clips like instruments and things like that. As far as noise goes, around 2016, 2017, I was just really getting into noise music, and I bought a really cheap, really grimy 16-channel mixer, and I just plugged in a whole bunch of stuff. I asked for like only guitar pedals for a birthday and got a bunch of guitar pedals and a bunch of cables, and just there's something really satisfying about turning knobs and pushing buttons and just making sound happen from that for me. And I do like live streams at like 6 o'clock in the morning on Twitch, wearing like flowers in my hair and stuff, and I had like a collage of like anime gifs that I like layered over top of each other with different like chroma key colors and stuff like that, and I just like sit there for like 2 hours before work and just turn knobs and make horrendous sounds.
Nice.
And that felt really good. If I ever go back to doing live music, because like I said, I was in a metal band in high school and we played shows in town here, I just want to like sit on the floor surrounded by pedals and knobs and just like for an hour, just make a room of people feel weird with noise. It's just, I don't know, it's sort of like a neo future primitivism sort of thing, and it feels really good to do it.
So yeah, do you have any future plans for music?
Yeah, every now and again, I'm thinking about, recently, in middle school and high school, I was really into the band Coheed and Cambria, and I thought that concept albums were about the best thing ever. I turned 30 this year, and I sort of challenged myself to make a concept album by the time I turned 30, so I'm working on something like that, but it's just a lot more traditionally musical. I've been getting back into playing my bass guitar, and enjoying doing that, so I'm tinkering with stuff like that, since virtual synths and live bass playing. I'd really love to be the vocalist for a metal project again. I think that would be really cool, but I don't know when I would have time to do anything like that. So it's definitely not something that I have like a really urgent feeling about. It's more just a couple times a month I'll open up FL Studio and work on something, and then be like, yeah, I can still do this, great, and then put it away.
All right, Joe. Oh, by the way, is this where you got the moniker NoiseMakerJoe?
I don't remember how I decided on that name. I think somebody else asked me that too, and I gave them an answer that I'm not sure how true it was. I've used NoiseMakerJoe for such a long time that I don't remember anything about it. Anything about its origin. Probably because I was making noise music type stuff at the time. Could also just have been like I've used several different online names over the years, and every time I pick a new one, I'm like, this is the one I'm going to be known by. This is going to be the brand. So far, NoiseMakerJoe has been the one that has stuck the best.
All right. Well, NoiseMakerJoe, final part of this interview, man. Your new occupation, being a new dad guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, first of all, congratulations to you and your wife on your new child.
Thank you.
Yeah, when was the child born?
4 weeks ago today, so June 15.
Oh, wow, so still fairly recent.
She is very tiny. Yeah, she's very young.
Good, this podcast remains timely, then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's been a month. How has the experience been so far, being a dad?
So far, really good. I don't know. I don't talk too much about, at least in public, about religion or spirituality or whatever. But for the past couple of years, I've sort of seen myself drawn into mysticism. This idea of achieving unity with either the universe or God or both or whatever, assuming that any of that even exists and we're not just brains in a jar somewhere or a simulation. And the having of a child, particularly when we finally got to bring her home, was quite a like powerful religious feeling experience. And so like I found it the sort of process of becoming a parent, of becoming a dad, to be unlike how people describe. So far, like, logistically, like, the baby's been great. She's healthy. She doesn't sleep at night super well, but we're not deathly sleep deprived or anything like that. She eats food. She's gaining weight. She's, all of that stuff. So it's been easy to just enjoy having a person in the house now. And sort of seeing myself in a different way with like a different responsibility to a different person. Because my wife and I have been together for like 13 years in some capacity, in the boyfriend-girlfriend capacity up through getting married. My self-image has been pretty static. It was one way before I stopped drinking, and then sort of shifted a little bit. It didn't really like wholly change when I stopped drinking. But like now there is a different sort of way that I approach how I talk about myself, especially in front of her, which kind of makes me have to change how I think about myself in terms of, the self, what's the word? Self-esteem and things like that. My approach to like activism and political praxis has changed. I've always kind of known that I'm not the type of person who should go to a peaceful protest where things might get heated. But there was always like this idea that like, yeah, but if things get really hairy, I'm gonna be out there in the streets, right? Like, the sort of George Orwell sort of like, I promised myself I would kill one fascist because there's more of us than there are of them. So if we all just make the promise to ourselves to kill one fascist, we'll be out of this in no time.
Yeah, you gotta do it, man. It's a rite of passage.
Yeah, the Spanish Civil War didn't quite go as well as George Orwell was hoping it was going to go.
Yeah, true.
But I now have like put a wall between myself and that line of thinking. Like, no, I cannot be militant anymore because I have a small person who I need to be alive and out of prison for. And so it shifted my view on like, it was very easy for me to be like, yeah, I just hate these people. I hate these people and they're bad and I hate them and I want them to feel bad. And like, I've completely sort of flipped around to like, I'm going to focus on doing what I can to protect those around me who are in danger and, try to shore up supports for people who are vulnerable rather than like going after the enemy. It's very much more like, I'm going to stay at home and I'm going to make sure that everyone's okay.
Well, you said that you're 30 years old, right?
I turned 30 this year, in a couple of months.
Oh, all right. So your child was just born, so 18 years. Yeah, dude, you got plenty of time, when you're in your 50s, you can kill as many fascists as you want them.
Right, yeah, I got plenty of time to join the Socialist Rifle Association later.
Exactly.
But for right now, So I've been trying to just, like, force myself to be more gentle in a lot of different ways, both with myself and with other people, and how I see the world in general. I'm very sort of seduced by cosmic pessimism, like this idea that existence is bad not like it changed everything, but it has caused me to want to really center my thoughts and my actions into a specific goal of creating an environment that is safe, emotionally and physically, and then trying to broaden that environment to as large a physical area as possible, right? Like, I can't go out and kill every fascist and every misogynist so that my daughter is safe, but I can do the little bit I can to make sure that at least my home is safe, and, you know, work with the organizations that exist within Grand Rapids to try to make Grand Rapids a nice place to live, and so on and so forth.
All right, so final question I have here, dude. Your kid was recently born. Having a good time with it, I guess.
Yeah, it's been great.
So, gonna have more kids?
We've been thinking about how we want to think about that. I mean, clearly, like, my wife is still physically recovering from having been pregnant and having done labor. So neither of us are, like, super gung-ho about it. We have sort of like a hard limit in the near future where it's like, if we don't feel ready to have a kid in the next, like, 4 years, we're going to have to, like, reevaluate, because we don't want the age gap to be too big. Both of us are middle children, and in fact, both of us, like, have similar age gaps between our older siblings and our younger siblings. So, like, we know what the relationship is like between two siblings who are 2 or 3 years apart versus 7 or 8 years. And we know what it's like to have 3 kids in a family. And so, if we do have one more kid, it will be the last kid. And if we don't have any more kids, I don't think either of us are going to feel like we missed out on anything.
If I could only have had one more kid.
Yeah.
Alright, everyone. Joe Bielecki, host of the Writing the Rapids podcast, author of Tired, new dad guy. Joe, thanks for coming on, dude.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, promo time. Let's give us out some info on where people can find you, where they can find your work, where they can listen to your podcast. Listen to your podcasts.
Yeah, NoiseMakerJoe on Twitter or Instagram is where I am most active. Patreon.com/NoiseMakerJoe is where basically anytime I put out writing, I'm going to put it out through there, and I'm going to put it out for free. That's also where you can get access to early Writing the Rapids episodes. Writing the Rapids is available anywhere that you get your podcast. So if you're listening to this podcast, it's very likely that you'll be able to get Writing the Rapids there too. I've mostly promote Spotify links because their metrics are the easiest for me to read, but I know that lately people aren't super happy with Spotify, so iTunes or iHeartRadio or any of the weird third-party Podbean, Podsmith, any of that stuff should be up there as well. I think the only place you can't get it is, like, SoundCloud.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I'd have to, like, as far as I know, I'd have to specifically make a SoundCloud account and, like, go through the effort of posting it to SoundCloud, and that just seems like extra work because when I post on my website, it just goes.
Yeah, then you'd have to pay for an unlimited pro account, or otherwise you would have like a 3-hour limit, I think.
Yeah, which would dry up pretty quick.
Yeah.
So yeah, or just NoiseMakerJoe. It's not the most updated website, but all the podcast episodes get posted there before they get proliferated out to the rest of the podcast ecosystems.
All right, everyone. That was NoiseMakerJoe. Joe, thanks for coming on, dude. It was a
Thank you.
real pleasure. I hope to have you on again someday.
Anytime.
Yep, and for all my devoted fans that are worried about my health, I got some good news. The right side of my mouth was numb at the start of this podcast, but it no longer is. So you can now hear my beautiful voice in its full extent. The bad news though is that since the numbness is gone, the pain is here. So I need to go take some Motrin or something because I am in excruciating pain.
Oh dear.
God, I hate dentists. But yeah, folks, thanks for listening. Check out my stuff. Check out Joe's stuff. And we'll see you around. Here is the outro song.